When you try to combine two universes and two continuities together that have had no previous connection to each other whatsoever up to this point, and then all of a sudden you try to make a crossover involving both of them, you usually end up with one or two results. You will either end up with something awesome, or something sucky. Guess which one this is. Transformers: Rise of the Darkspark. Now, for those of you who might not be aware of this, allow me to go ahead and quickly explain the events, or the placement of this game in general. Transformers: Rise of the Darkspark takes place between the two High Moon developed Transformer games, Transformers War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron. This places directly in the middle, while at the same time, this is also meant to be a crossover with the recent Michael Bay universe Transformer movies, as well specifically Age of Extinction and its aftermath. And like the title suggests, the focus of this story, in terms of all the conflicts starting around and what's going on in this game, follows around this Darkspark, which is supposed to be the antithesis of the Matrix of Leadership, which Optimus Prime wields in his chest. And as I mentioned, being the antithesis of the Matrix of Leadership, the Darkspark is an element that is the complete opposite of said Matrix and allows the user to get an unbelievable amount of power and energy bestowed upon them should they come into contact with the Darkspark and use it for themselves. And since this is a crossover between the Michael Bay universe and the Cybertron games, this is actually going to have two villains in the form of Megatron, who we all know from the Transformers universe, or anyone who has ever heard of Transformers knows of Optimus Prime and Megatron. But the second Transformer that comes in here as a villain is known by the name of Lockdown, a Transformer mercenary, if you will, seeking profit. I will admit, I'm a big fan of the Cybertron games, specifically War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron, and Fall of Cybertron being the one that I prefer the most. Mostly because they were very solid, well-built games. Sure, they may not have had the best story out of the Transformers medium, but in terms of being solid games, in terms of being a good story, giving you perspectives of both Autobots and Decepticons, and just overall being really fun games, they were really good. Going into this game, there were two big concerns that were puzzling me and worrying me as this game was coming close to release date and as I was about to play through it. Reason number one is that it is not being developed by High Moon. It is actually being developed by Edge of Reality, who some of you might know from developing the Incredible Hulk game that came out a few years back. But the second reason I was most concerned for this game was the fact that it was not only a crossover with the Cybertron games, but it was specifically a crossover with the Michael Bay universe, which I will admit I am not a fan of. I am not a fan of Michael Bay's Transformers movies. If you like them, that's fine. They're just not my thing. So the fact they're combining the Michael Bay universe and the Cybertron games universe, two series that have had no contact in with each other whatsoever up to this point, and now all of a sudden are being brought together in one game, it kinda turns out the story is, well, you know what? I'll say story for last. Let's get into the gameplay first and see how well this actually plays out. The gameplay itself for Darkspark is actually the most solid aspect about this game, and here's why. In terms of the gameplay, it actually adapts more of the Fall of Cybertron and War for Cybertron aspects, where you're allowed to transform at any time, where you are allowed to pick assortment of guns, upgrade them as you go throughout the game, and make them visually more powerful and gameplay-wise more powerful. And there's also one light weapon and one heavy weapon slot you're allowed to upgrade for your said Autobot or Decepticon that you're playing as. On top of that, you're also allowed to give what they're known as hacks, or basic power-ups or decrease in power-ups to make the game either more of a challenge or to give you a slight edge in battle, some of which have a lasting effect throughout the level, and other ones have a one-time use that you can activate at any time that you want. And these power-ups can range from exploding headshots, which makes enemies have more health but automatic kill when you get a headshot, or something that allows you to explode enemies and basically chain set explosions around other enemies that are close in the vicinity. Other power-ups make it much more difficult for you to play the game, such as having no HUD, but that will increase your experience, to which you can level up and gain what's known as gearboxes, which allow you to either gain access to certain Autobots or Decepticons, upgrades, or weapons. Now, while the gameplay may be solid, I unfortunately cannot say the same thing for every other aspect of this game. I'll just go ahead and get the simplest thing out of the way right now in terms of problems with this game. The music is utterly forgettable. It's monotonous, it's boring, it's tedious. You don't remember a single note according to the soundtrack. And again, I don't want to bash on this game's soundtrack just for the sake of finding something forgettable. It literally, I want to enjoy every game score that I come across. I legitimately do, because I feel like it can be great. But again, there's just nothing memorable about this game in terms of score. every time that you hear a certain theme, or you might remember a certain theme, it's only because it was beaten into your head over the course of several hours and just hearing it over and over and over again. And that's not how great music works. Great music is something that you want to remember. That's something that evokes an emotion out of you, not tedious and boredom. The presentation in this game by itself is also inconsistent. Now, Cybertron, I will admit, looks really good. It always did look good in War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron. Now, I will understand that this game is probably being held back due to the fact that it is being developed for last-gen hardware on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. Because I played the PS4 version, and I could tell that this game was being clearly held back because of last-gen standards. Now, the Transformers homeworld of Cybertron looked fine as ever. It looked great in War for Cybertron, it looked better in Fall for Cybertron, and it still looks good now. However, since this is a crossover with the Michael Bay universe, we also have segments that take place on Earth. And the segments on Earth just look lazy. There is not one location that you remember in any way, shape, or form with regards to the Michael Bay universe or the Earth segments that take place during Darkspark. Again, all it is just either jungles and valleys, wrecked cities, uninspired corridors. Now, to be fair, you actually spend more time on Cybertron than you do on Earth. However, the inconsistency in presentation, both in terms of how good Cybertron looks and how bland and boring Earth looks, it creates an inconsistency in presentation, aesthetics, and overall atmosphere for the game. It doesn't look like they took any effort to make it as seamless as they could. Now, I will admit, putting these two universes together would have been really difficult to do, considering there has been no previous connection so far. And that's one thing that comes off as confusing with the storyline, but I'll get to that in a moment. Oh wait, there's one element of the gameplay I almost forgot to mention, so allow me to back up to the gameplay section just a quick moment. In the gameplay section, I did mention that it is solid, you can transform at any time, and it's fun to upgrade weapons and progress throughout the game. But there's one key element that occurs at the very end of this game that basically renders all of the progression pretty much useless. Here's what it is. In the final boss fight, oh wait, hold on. Before I go into this, I'm going to have to put spoiler warning, because I really try to avoid spoilers in terms of my reviews, but I cannot make my valid argument unless I describe exactly what is going on and how this actually works in the context of the game at large. So if you don't want spoilers, I'll put a time somewhere in this video just so that way you can see where you can go into this video and not have to worry about being spoiled. There, I'll give you a second. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about this. In the final boss fight with Lockdown at the very end of this game, you actually come in with your whole arsenal of weapons. You have your most powerful weapon, that's light weapon. You have your most powerful heavy weapon at your disposal. You got all your hacks ready to go. You're ready to use them, and you feel like, yes, this is going to be exciting. And all of a sudden, the fight starts up, and all your weapons are effectively useless against him because of the power of the Darkspark that gives him. So, what exactly do you use against such a weapon, against the Darkspark, which one of its abilities is to slow you down anywhere across this arena in which you fight Lockdown? How do you do it? Using Optimus's shield. Do you see where the problem comes from? I'm pretty sure you do already, but for those of you who may not, I don't want to sound like I'm discrediting you, but allow me to explain. The reason why this is a problem is because of the fact that, one, it renders all reason to progress and upgrade your weapons throughout the entire game, in which you want to just unload everything against the final boss. You spend so much time destroying Decepticons and Transformer mercenaries that it just makes you want to go, what is the point of fighting this guy with my weapons that I have them? And effectively, when I am able to fight with them, they end up being useless. You practically can't make a dent in this guy with the weapons you have. And I was using the riot cannon in full power, and one of its last upgrades, it's actually the fact that its last shot turns out to be 500% damage on normal blast. That's insane. And the other one I had was a Scrap Maker, which is basically a triple-barreled machine gun Gatling gun that twists around and fires in rapid succession. And it ruins any sense of catharsis or strategy involved with the game, period. Everything I just mentioned in terms of criticisms have become only the tip of the iceberg when I get to the story in comparison. The story in this game is an absolute mess, filled with so many plot holes and things unexplained that I almost don't know where to start, but I'll go ahead and list a few that just beg to be answered. For example, Lockdown himself. Now, I will admit I have not seen the Transformers Age of Extinction movie. I don't know that much about Lockdown. But this is something that I just can't begin to wrap my head around because someone hasn't properly explained this to me. So take this question with a grain of salt. This guy, Lockdown, is a Transformer mercenary or bounty hunter. And his main goal is that he wants to be paid, like all bounty hunters do. Now here's my question. What could a Transformer want with money? Why does it care about being paid? I mean, I will admit, I'm no huge Transformers fanatic. I don't know the history of all the Transformers. I only know Autobots and Decepticons fighting each other. That's all I am aware of, and I know several of them, and I know maybe a little bit of the brief history of Cybertron, but I learned nothing about their economy, their society, what they were like in the millions and millions of years in the past. Why would a Transformer even want money? And not only that, but he has practically his own private army during the course of the game. So is he getting all this money to pay them? Is he doing it so that way he can upgrade himself or his shit to make them more powerful? It's never explained as to why he wants money. Now, I don't have a problem if it's a Transformer mercenary and he wants money, but the problem is that it never gives the player, or myself for that matter, an explanation as to what goal is he using this money for. He doesn't explain it at all. He just says, I want to be well paid, or I just want profit. And let me make this clear right off the bat, I'm not trying to find something nitpicky about this game just for finding something to complain about. This is a legitimate question that I have for any Transformers fan out there, and I just want an explanation. And if you can give me a logical explanation, I will fully admit that my criticism is invalid. However, that is not the only question that was raised during the course of this game as I was playing it, and I'm sorry, but I'll have to go back into spoiler territory again. Here's where things get really messy. At the very end of this game, when you fight Lockdown and beat him, basically, Lockdown has the Darkspark removed from his body, and Optimus basically goes Death Star tractor beam on it. When Optimus Prime sends the Darkspark shard into this beam, into this guy, the time gate, into this interdimensional gate, basically it looks like he's sending it back in time, back to Cybertron. Okay, fine, it's going back to Cybertron. It looks like it's going to stay there. But no, I researched after this game that occurs that the Darkspark at the very end was destroyed. Okay, so it's destroyed. However, this is where things get really screwed up. At the very, very, very end of this game, I'm sorry again for going into spoilers, but I have to exclaim this in order to prove the point of how messy this plot is. The thing is, you see Generation 1 Optimus Prime from the first Transformer series going across the desert, just walking around, minding his own business. You see said Darkspark flying through the sky and crash landing on Earth. So, my question to the story and to the developers, I may ask, is the Darkspark destroyed or is it not? Because not only have you now involved these Cybertron games, you've involved the Michael Bay universe, and now you're involving the Generation 1 Transformers, so you've effectively have involved what sounds like 3 universes in one game that have had no continuity with each other or previous games to establish said connection at all. Now there's some that claim that it is meant to be an alternate universe, but here's the kicker. According to my research that I found for this game is meant to be a in-between sequel to War for Cybertron and Fall for Cybertron. It's supposed to sit right in the middle of them. However, this is also meant to be a sequel to Transformers Age of Extinction. So, by implication of those two universes being in the same game, and they're meant to be either midquels or sequels to some universe, that is implying that the Transformers Fall of Cybertron games are meant to be in canon now with the Michael Bay universe. Which to me brings up the question of, okay, so does that mean every previous Transformers game make it canon now? And if so, why is there no previous established continuity in terms of the other games going on in Cybertron? Not only does the Generation 1 Optimus Prime seem out of place, but when the Darksparks fall into Earth, Optimus Prime in the Generation 1 scene ends up saying the exact same line as the Optimus Prime in the Michael Bay universe and saying, I was so hoping this day would never come, or something along those lines. It's the exact same line involving the exact same object from the exact same Autobot. However, it is in two different scenes in what appears to be two different continuities. It never establishes that it's an alternate dimension or if it's the same timeline. Ultimately, it makes the viewer and the player confused and makes the story come off as an incoherent, jumbled mess. Whew, my apologies folks, I just had a lot to get off of my chest for that one. So let's go ahead and not dawdle anymore and get into my final line and grade. So, bottom line, the gameplay is as solid as ever. It's fun to transform, it's fun to blast Decepticons and mercenaries as always. However, the gameplay is ruined by the very end of the fact that all sense of progression and purpose of having set upgrades and weapons progression is rendered useless because it is ineffective against the final boss and ruining all sense of purpose for it. And while I admit the presentation on Cybertron still looks fine, the fact that Earth is so bland, boring, and forgettable, it just comes off as an inconsistent presentation and doesn't work for the game in its favor. And the story being as incoherent, a confusing, just muddled, jumbled mess, I ultimately have to give this game to Transformers Rise of the Darkspark as saying, play it at your own risk. So there you go folks, that is my review of Transformers Rise of the Darkspark. I hope you enjoyed this. Now, if you have a personal favorite Transformer, Autobot, or Decepticon, please let me know in the comments below. And if you guys want me to review the previous games, such as War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron, I'd be happy to do so. It certainly get the taste out of my mouth from this one. So yeah, comment below, tell me what you think. Until next time, everybody, I'm Perry the One-Armed Legend, and I'll see you later.